I want you to think about this situation. Imagine right now it's starting to get nice outside, and you're going to start going out regardless of this quarantine, or maybe the quarantine's lifted. You take your child out to the playground. Maybe you go out for a nice long walk. Maybe you get everybody together and you actually go down to the beach, or just for a drive because you've been locked up for so long. Imagine how nice that's going to be. Now I want you to imagine something else that could quite possibly happen. The unthinkable. While you're gone, somebody who's been watching and casing your neighborhood breaks in your house and steals everything. Or maybe you go to the park with your child, and while you turn around in conversation because you're so happy, a pedophile takes your child. How do you prevent something like this from happening? By preparing right now. Don't wait until things get back to normal. Go get Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and its 2 accompanying workbooks, and do the threat assessments on yourself from the attacker's point of view. And for your children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans are at teamlittlebigs.com. This is how you prepare yourself for then. Don't wait. Order them now. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and its 2 accompanying workbooks, the Threat Assessment and Defense Assessment workbooks. And for the children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans that you download for free at teamlittlebigs.com. Go check it out.
He worked it out so we always had available beds. Nobody was deprived of a bed or medical coverage in any way. And still people died. Still people died. Older people, vulnerable people are going to die from this virus. That is going to happen, despite whatever you do.
Jonathan Gilliam back in on the Experts Podcast, and we got lots of hammers to drop down. Sing it, Melissa. So that is Octane by Burnos. You can pick that up on iTunes, by the way. So what we're going to talk about starting off is that soundbite that you just heard there, and there's so many things wrong with that soundbite. It's crazy that the man who's speaking that, the governor of New York, Cuomo, before when this stuff started, when the coronavirus started kicking off, okay, everybody was like singing his praises. Even I was like, man, he's actually making some sense. But he, like all these other governors around the country, and not just governors, you also have city council people, or I don't know what they call them out here in New York, different people. I'll play you a soundbite from somebody here in a minute. It was ridiculous, from either Nassau or Suffolk County. I can't remember which one it is. I'm not really concerned, but these politicians that feel like they have to have these press conferences every day. And I have been railing on the president's press conferences that he has to cover the coronavirus. I thought every once in a while they were useful, but overall they were absolutely useless. And it did him no favors with getting reelected in November. It was many times the press conferences were that bad. And they're so contentious that it just is. I just turn it off. It doesn't do any good at all. But his press conferences by far outweigh the ones that we see by Cuomo and all these other city planners and people. At least there was truth and honesty in Trump's press conferences. I'm not just saying that because I'm a Trump supporter. He didn't come out there saying stupid, ridiculous things and criminal things like these people do. Now, before I get into the deal with Cuomo and why it is such a big thing that he did in that soundbite, I have to bring up these secretaries of health that are all over the place. I mean, I'm just going to pick three out right off the top of my head, and everybody knows that's watching the news at all knows these three people. It's the Secretary of Health, I don't know what her exact title is in California. You have the Secretary of Health in Pennsylvania, and in New York, you have the commissioner of New York City's health commissioner. They like to have commissioners in New York. Let's start off with the New York City Commissioner of Health. She blew off the NYPD's request for 500,000 surgical masks. Now, you got to think about this, okay? NYPD has had several people die already from the coronavirus, and they are inundated with the virus in New York City more than anywhere else in the country. So why this health commissioner decided to say, she literally said this to the request. She told high-ranking police official that I don't give two rats' asses about your cops. Why? So I don't have to ask why. Any other place, she would have been fired immediately and just raked over the coals in media. But that's not happening. It's not even happening on Fox News. It's not really even happening on any other podcast that you hear. That's how bad this is, that we've either gone so far left or people's priorities are so out of whack that they're still bitching and complaining over Dr. Fauci and the pandemic video. And I've gotten, even today, I got into some debate with this zealot for whatever the lady's name is, Judy Mekovich or whatever. I don't know. I've purposely blocked her name out of my head that was in pandemic, even though I've done all this research on her and talked to several other people who've done research on her. And there's so much stuff that's wrong with what she says and the people who made that video. And I've gone over that at nauseum, but people are so spun up about vaccines, and there will be a day and time when you have to worry about that. But I've got a little clue for you, folks. If these weirdos, these socialist leftist weirdos, aren't stopped in this country, you won't have a choice about a vaccine. Literally. Look at what's happening all over the country, where the police in these leftist governed cities and states, the police are being used, and I did a whole show on this already, where the police are being used to enforce the people's right to go out of their homes. And it's absurd. At first, you were seeing every now and then you would see, the video that you saw of the woman that was on the playground and she got arrested. And I always think when I see these things, just like the media, it's so funny. People insult the media and say it's fake news. Look, it is fake news. I've seen it from behind the scenes. Fake, as far as you can see. Fox News, 70% or more of the people that work behind the scenes there came from NBC or CNN, and they're all liberal. It's an act. And CNN, it's no act. MSNBC, it's no act. They are far left. But it's always interesting when you see people go out and do the exact same thing. When they record something and then they edit it to make the cops look bad. But it is happening. It is happening. And the cops are being, some forced. I do believe that the sheriff in Texas that arrested I believe it was a bar owner where they showed up and they had the guys that were armed, and they arrested 7 guys who had weapons, and then the bar owner who had opened because they didn't have any money. The lady said, we have to open because literally my employees are starving. So we got to try to make some money. So that sheriff came out there, and it was stupid the way they did it. They escalated the situation. They could have called or done nothing. They could have done nothing. I mean, the next day, Governor Abbott changed the mandate, saying that people, that nonsense wouldn't happen, largely in part because of not because of that, but because of the hairdresser that was locked up. There are stipulations about the bar and why those people were arrested with the guns, because you're not supposed to have guns on, I guess, in those areas. In a lot of areas around the country, you're not supposed to have firearms on the premise of a bar. Okay. So whatever the situation was with that, it looked terrible. And the sheriff, and I say this with all due respect, all the fat asses that work for him, guys, lose some weight. I'm not saying you got to go out there and be, Mr. Olympia, but you got to have some standards for weight. It was absolutely insulting to law enforcement how big these guys were. But the sheriff was stuck in the middle of that, and the optics were not good. And what they're not doing is showing up and saying, man, we got to think this thing through. Let's not escalate this to where we start violating people's constitutional violations. Let's see if we can talk this through. And if they're just idiots on the other side, just let it be and don't let anybody else in there, and let it diffuse itself. And quite frankly, that's probably what's going to happen most of the time now when it comes to these businesses that are opening, whether they're supposed to or not. The big thing is people have to we're grown-ups. We should have a choice. Which brings me back to what I started to talk about a second ago with this idiot health commissioner in New York City. And I've got her name here. Dr. Barbot. I'm not even going to try to say her first name. She's also the one in March that was telling people, along with Dingbat de Blasio, the mayor of New York City, to go out, go to bars, go to restaurants, go to plays, see a movie. They were all telling them this right around the 1st of March, when all the other politicians, and I don't want to say leaders, but people in leadership positions around the country were already starting to say, whoa, we got to get on this real quick. Trump was definitely saying that. These idiots were still saying go out, and they're responsible themselves for no telling how many people that caught the virus and died. When we look at the health commissioner in LA, she looks like the Walking Dead. And listen, I'm not picking on these people because they're women. It is kind of interesting that they're all women and there's no male doctors in there. But whatever, it is political correctness, and it's what the leftists do. So you have a female in LA that's totally leftist, head of their health commission, and she looks like the Walking Dead. I mean, looks literally like she already died and then somehow was resurrected, but not in the holy Jesus way. Like, she looks like she's still the Walking Dead. And you look at Pennsylvania, or you look at New York, the one I just talked about, nasty individual, said she didn't give two rats' asses about the police. That's a crazy statement, that she didn't want to even entertain their request for masks. And then to top it all off, in Pennsylvania, you have this transgender man. It says he's a woman, but he's still a man, transgender, and is responsible, along with doing the same thing that Cuomo did, for mandating that elderly people that caught corona had to go to these rehab clinics, also known as retirement homes or old folks homes. And I've talked about this already. I went to a protest a week ago about the one where the guy that I got the coronavirus from, when he collapsed, was in for 2 weeks. And it was 39 people that we know of died in that home alone, because Cuomo and this weirdo in Pennsylvania and the governor there in Pennsylvania all mandated that elderly people with coronavirus could not go to the hospital. They had to go to these clinics. Now, when I play this soundbite from Cuomo again, that should kind of shock you. But here's what's even more shocking is that after it started to be the case, and I don't know how they couldn't have seen this was going to happen, all of a sudden, these elderly people started to pass away in high numbers. Cuomo and his staff decided to make sure that they quickly put in that bill that they had already written, that they couldn't be sued, and nor could the retirement or the rehab clinics, whatever you want to call them, that they couldn't be sued as well. So his staff slipped that stuff in there. But I just have a feeling it's not going to work out so well, because as of a week ago today, he changed it and said, okay, maybe, we're not going to send elderly people there. Well, it's too little too late. They have literally lost thousands of elderly people here. They had the Mercy was here, the Navy ship Mercy. They had the Javits Center. They could have been sending COVID patients, elderly COVID patients there. And they didn't. They forced them to go to these rehab clinics. That makes no sense. What Cuomo did was criminal in that he took it upon himself to make a decision and the same with these other people, but each one of them has their own little flavor of criminality. He took it upon himself, as did the others, to force sick, elderly, vulnerable people to be affected by something that could have been contained. And he literally forced it into these clinics. And then had his staff write into the bill that he could not be sued, and that these clinics could not be sued. You want to talk about some mob sounding stuff, man. This sounds extremely mafia, or that's the way they run their stuff. Legitimate businesses, very corrupt practices. That's why the unions are so filled with mafia, because they can do a legitimate thing. They say, oh yeah, we run the union. This is a union president. Meanwhile, they're shaking everybody down that works there, just like they used to in the neighborhoods. Hey, we're going to protect you. Well, I don't want to pay dues. Then if you don't pay dues, you're not going to be here anymore. You're not going to be protected. And then who knows what else would happen. Now you look at the transgender health secretary in Pennsylvania, and he actually took his mom out of a rehabilitation clinic. At the same time, he was helping pass the law that they would be forced to go, that elderly people with coronavirus would go there, and they were flooded with it and had all these massive deaths. This is criminal behavior. The very fact that health commissioner or secretary in Pennsylvania pulled their own mother out shows you that they realized and they knew the potential that this would have. And they still did it. And it makes no sense. It makes no sense. There's no way they couldn't have known that these people were going to die. Now listen now. This was yesterday. Listen to what Cuomo says now. This is the same soundbite I played at the beginning.
He worked it out so we always had available beds. Nobody was deprived of a bed or medical coverage in any way.
Okay, here's what's wrong with that. He's saying that nobody was ever deprived of a bed or medical coverage. First of all, these rehabilitation clinics are not medical. Okay, they posture themselves and they fall under the medical community somehow. But it is not medicine in the way that we look at a hospital. Like they have rehabilitation people in there, and I'm sure they have physical therapists. But the average experience level of the staff and the responsibility that they're given is horrendous. The experience level is about the same as somebody, and the qualifications is about the same as somebody who flips burgers at McDonald's or checks you out when you go to the grocery store. Now imagine that person being responsible for the well-being of your mother or your grandfather who's just had shoulder surgery, like one of the people that was there at the protest where I was at. Their mother had shoulder surgery and went in there and was dead in 2 weeks. And now we're finding out that a COVID patient was knowingly brought into that floor, into that area where all these people were. They brought a known COVID patient in there. It spread, and 39 people died in there. It's not including the number of people that were released and then died with COVID. And in my case, that they were released, the family wasn't told that they had COVID. They didn't know that they had COVID. The patient didn't know. They released him. He collapsed. And when we helped him, we all got infected with it. So they were responsible for infecting 4 people. And we don't even know what the long-term problems that we'll have with this. What Cuomo is saying right here is that nobody went without a bed or without care. In the case of the individual that I got coronavirus from, he was sat in a chair for 2 weeks in this clinic, this quote unquote rehabilitation clinic, after having surgery for his neck. And they put him in there, sat him in a chair, and when the coronavirus got on that floor, the doctor wouldn't even step foot in his room. He just stood in the hallway and asked questions and left. He didn't get his teeth brushed. He didn't get washed. Nothing. So when he came home, the clothes that he had on were covered with it. Now that is the care that you're getting there, Cuomo. That's the care that you're giving these people. Pennsylvania. So to say that nobody went without care or without a bed, that is bull crap. And it's criminal because now he's covering it up. He's making it sound like, it's going to happen. This stuff's going to happen. Listen to the rest of the soundbite.
And still people died.
Yeah, they died because people with coronavirus under your direction were sent into those clinics. It falls on you, Cuomo. And the same in Pennsylvania.
Older people, vulnerable people are going to die from this virus. That is going to happen, despite whatever you do.
No, that's not true. If you didn't send people there with coronavirus, if the people that worked there were more professional and actually gave a crap, and if they started to feel like they had symptoms, or even better, if the hospital was really professional, those people would also be professional that were watching over the patients. They would have taken extra care, gone straight home, not associated with people, came straight back to work, or even the hospital could have given them places to stay for periods of time so they didn't go outside and come in contact with the virus. None of that stuff happened. Nobody thinks that way in this community for some strange reason. It's a health community. So it's supposedly medical treatment, but nobody thinks that way. Maybe you don't go home and associate with people, have a barbecue, hang out, drink some beer with your buddies, whatever they were doing, and then come back with it. And you don't send people who are COVID positive into homes where elderly people are, knowing that, as he just stated, they are vulnerable. So no, it's a lie. People don't just have to die. People aren't just going to die because of this. It's because of him, and the same thing in Pennsylvania and the same thing in the VA. We're up here in New York City, you had 70 veterans die because somebody didn't do their job. If you have 70 veterans that are in-house, how in the world did that virus get in there? It's not like they were flying around spraying it. It's not Agent Orange. Somebody walked in there with it. And most likely, it was either a patient that was brought there with it, or it was somebody that works there that wasn't taking the proper precautions. That's the facts. And this governor and the health secretary in Pennsylvania both showed evidence that they knew that the potential was there. They both knew that something bad was going to happen. He took her mom in Pennsylvania out of the clinic to make sure they didn't get sick. And Cuomo had it written in the bill that he couldn't be sued and that the clinics couldn't be sued. That is all the proof that you need. Now, you're going to be interested how I relate this stuff to General Flynn. And I'm not going to go into great detail about General Flynn because I'm still watching how this unfolds. And I want to watch how this unfolds and then talk about it, because just like the Russian investigation and all these different things that they've done against President Trump, myself and several others that I'm good friends with, some of them are still in the FBI, some of them are not. We sit back, we monitor this stuff, and we discuss it. And every time we're absolutely correct. And it's not just us. I mean, you can talk to any cop. The majority of the people in the country know what's going on. But there's a lot of people that are getting what happened to Flynn wrong. Their theory is wrong. And I know, because my sources have firsthand knowledge, that the reality is that there was most likely an investigation already going on with General Flynn. And so when that happens, what you have to understand, and I'm going to push all this stuff together, and you're going to understand where I'm coming with this, but I have to clear this up first. When the FBI is doing an investigation and a American person pops up as they having contact with one of these foreign entities, and they have that information, the FBI owns that information. They don't have to reach out to the NSA to get permission to unmask somebody. By the nature of the way investigations are done, if the FBI got the FISA, they own that FISA. And when I say own, that's the terminology that they use, and the legal terminology that they use in the court system. So the FBI owned that FISA. Now, I'm not justifying the FISA. I'm not saying that they didn't create and entrap General Flynn with fake evidence. That all could be true. But the contention here that I have with a lot of these different people that are analyzing it on podcasts and on TV is that they think that the FBI had to go to somebody else to get permission or to get them to unmask the information. But that's not true. The FBI owned the information because they owned the FISA. So when the information for a FISA comes in, what happens is, and I'm going to use this in very general terms so that you don't get all in the weeds, because there's only a little bit about this that you really need to understand. As the information comes in on the FISA, it is automatically going to be known by a certain amount of people. Like, let's say that, and it's very similar on Title III, which I worked a lot with Title III. The Title III is it's a wire that you get in a criminal case. A FISA is secret, right? So there's going to be fewer people that actually know about, although in a criminal case, it could be sealed as well and people aren't going to know about it. But when we do Title III wires and the investigation has a a person that speaks another language, we'll have interpreters in there that will listen to this real time. And then we write a report about it. And there's going to be several people along the way, interpreters, all these other people that are going to see exactly what this information is and who said it. It's the same thing in a FISA, very similar anyway, that when the information comes in, remember the FBI owns the FISA. Doesn't matter how they got the FISA, they own the FISA. So the information is theirs. And certain people within the Bureau and the DOJ are already going to know who that person is that they're listening to, that American citizen that they're now spying on, actively listening to, or they got caught up in the conversation. The attorneys from the DOJ are going to know who that is. The intelligence officers, if the FBI decides to share that with them, which most likely they would in these cases because of the nature of where it came out of, if it was an embassy or it was in the Dominican Republic, and you see where I'm going with this, they would already know that that these people are being listened to, and so they may request the information from the FBI, and the FBI will give them that information. Automatically, certain people are going to know who this person is. So when we say unmasking, the way that the news is reporting it, and a lot of these people in podcast stuff are reporting this, it's not exactly correct. There is such a thing as unmasking, but really what you're looking at in this case is that, and this is my opinion on this, is that it's more like leaking. There are going to be certain people that know who this American person is when they come up on a FISA. The FBI owns information, like I said, but how it gets to the media and how it gets spread around, there's formal channels that you go through in order to request that information if you're another agency. But if, Joe is listening to this, or he's privy to this information because he's in the Bureau, and he tells Nancy, who works in the DOD, or Larry, who works inside the White House, and they spread it around. And let's say that it's a cabal, like I know it is. I've been watching this whole thing, and these people all believe in this same exact stuff. They have the same exact ideology. They use the same tactics. They have... these are people, like I said before on this podcast, they go eat together, they go to church together, they go shopping in the same grocery stores, their kids go to the same schools. If they're in cahoots with each other, now you're getting into not even formal unmasking. Now you're getting into people who are sharing information for a conspiracy. They're conspiring to overthrow the president, or they're conspiring to get General Flynn locked up. And I believe that's what happened with General Flynn. It wasn't so much or it wasn't at all that the Bureau had to go to another agency and request the information. They unmasked who this person is. The Bureau owned the FISA. So it's just a matter of people passing around the information. They always make it, because a lot of the people in media are attorneys, so they always try to make this into a bigger case than it really is. If I know a secret, because I work for the agency that owns that secret, and I don't like this guy, I mean, listen, we all take an oath, but the oath is only as much as the spirit of the individual who takes the oath. So if they're a part of some leftist cabal, sure, they could go give it to whoever they wanted. There's no legal chain there. And if they give it to the media, that's called leaking. Now, why did I bring this up right here? And there's a lot more to this that I'm going to talk about this week. The Carter Page issue is very, very suspicious to me. I think the president, and I'm going to go into detail with this later this week, I think the president bringing Carter Page on board was a bad mistake. Carter Page probably most likely was known to have CIA contacts, or because he was an asset for the CIA, a limited asset. But I'm sure the people in the White House knew that. This guy is, to me, and I've been in a room with him, I haven't met him, but it's fishy all the way around. These people that exist in and around Washington, D.C., that are younger than I am, that have all these contacts around the world. Now, there's one of two things with that. Either they grew up in an elitist family, and or they work for the agency or one of these intel agencies, and they're used as an asset to go and make contacts. And I think in the case of Carter Page, it was a catch-22 having him in the White House. He looks like a hero now, but I think the reality is very well they could have either used him knowingly or unknowingly to go and set up these meetings and make these things happen so they could entrap Flynn and the president and Donald Trump Jr. and all these other people. It's really as simple as that. I wrote an article about it in the Daily Caller before I knew how weird they were. Back in 2017, I actually wrote the article in 2016 after all this stuff started and published it at the beginning of 2017. It predicted this whole thing. If they have a source, this thing has source written all over it. It screams confidential human intelligence, where they handle somebody to have them go and do certain things, set up certain meetings, meet certain people, not so that they can entrap that person, but so that they can bring another person in and meet and set up the meeting and record it. Because they know if somebody meets in and around an embassy, it's probably going to be recorded. They know that if it's a certain person from the Russian government, it's probably going to be recorded. So all they have to do is introduce them or get them to have, to motivate this individual to go over there and talk to them that they're looking to entrap. So somebody like Carter Page, I find it very fishy. And what I do know about counterintelligence and these types of operations is that, and I try to make this clear to people all the time when it comes to this pandemic video or, how everybody's listen, I'm not a Fauci fan, all right? So don't think that I am, but how everybody thinks, I'm not a fan of anybody that's in executive government. Let's just get that out of the way right now, okay? I don't trust any of them. But everybody's freaking out over Fauci, freaking out over Bill Gates, freaking out over this pandemic video. You're freaking out over the wrong things. Like I said in the beginning of the show, I think I said it, I know I said it on Twitter, if socialism is allowed to take over, what you're seeing in LA and in New York City and in Pennsylvania and other places like that, what you're seeing there is what's going to be all over this country. And you won't have a choice about a vaccine. You will either take it or you'll go to jail. So what do you concentrate on right now? Fauci and Bill Gates and pandemic, or do you focus on keeping these socialists at bay? And I know people that are listening will say, well, Fauci and those and Bill Gates, they're socialists. So they're not the ones that are vying for position to govern this country. They're policy people. And I'm not talking about Bill Gates. Bill Gates to me reminds me of a George Soros God person that thinks that they have a God complex and a lot of money so they can continue to feed that complex. But people are focusing on the wrong thing. And that's the way counterintelligence works. They will make a population so pissed off about one thing that they totally forget or don't even realize what's happening over here. I mean, they kind of realize, but they're not even concerned. They're so emotional, arguing every day on Twitter. I don't know why Al-Qaeda hasn't fitted, hundreds of really beautiful women with bombs and marched them into this country, because the majority, well, this is before, the virus came in, because you could march them into a stadium and men and women, if they're scantily clad, would look over there. Half of them would be saying she needs to put clothes on. The other half be saying, wow, I need to go meet her. And they could walk right in. And while that person is walking over there with weapon of some kind, somebody else could walk right behind all those people. They would never even notice them. That's the way, I remember when I was at the end of Buds and we were out in San Clemente Island and we were coming back, and I forget the instructor's name right now that's in my mind, but we were on this Navy vessel that's kind of got an upper floor, and we're all up there. We're all, in the best shape of our lives, exhausted. So they kind of left us alone for like the 2-hour trip, come back on this Navy vessel. And somebody found this silver thing that reflected, it was like shiny, and they put it on the ground on the bottom floor, and they were like, let's all sit here and watch who comes up. And we're being stupid. We're punch drunk, and we're like, see who touches that thing. And sure enough, this instructor walked by, and when he walked by, that glared, and he looked down, he picked it up and walked off with it. Man, we were all dying laughing. But that's the case. That's how this works. Look over here at this shiny thing, get all pissed off about it while we go do this. And that's what's happening in this country. So when I look at Carter Page, and I look at General Flynn, and I look at the way that whole thing unfolded, when I look back at Cuomo, and I look at the way he maneuvered to get these people into these retirement homes, and then went in and covertly made it to where he couldn't be sued and their clinics couldn't be sued, the way that the health secretary in Pennsylvania helped get all that stuff in place, the same way while she was pulling his mother out. All of this is very similar. It's very similar in the way that it's really a virus, but this cancer of corruption that is flowing through the upper echelons of government and the agencies throughout the country. It's not just the federal government. It's not just the state governments. It actually exists in local governments. It's not just General Flynn. It exists with, as you can see, with rehabilitation clinics for the elderly. And we have gotten, and it's not just leftist. It's not just leftists. Why do you think leftists are so powerful in this country? It's because the politicians on the right, and by and large the conservative people in this country, and even the liberals, just let it happen. I've always said over and over, and I saw this in the FBI big time, not in the ranks of the FBI, but with the criminals that we were working in and investigations that we were doing. When you create a vacuum or a void, somebody is going to fill that void. They're always going to come in and fill that void. And quite often, if somebody is bad, they're going to get worse. And that, when we look at the quote unquote war on terror, and I do believe that ISIS and Al Qaeda and fundamental Islam should be crushed. There's no doubt about it. But when you look at who's leading the DOD, McCraven, McChrystal, Petraeus, and I'm sure it's the same now, Admiral Green that was jamming up Eddie Gallagher. These people are leftists. And the problem is that the American people have created this void. Yes, I'm putting that on us. The citizenry has created that void that they have filled. Why? Because we sold out to the Republican and Democrat parties. We did. We sold out to them. And people believe that whatever they say is the way it is, but that's an illusion. Just like I was talking about earlier with the counterintelligence operations, you're under the illusion that the Democrat and Republican parties have all the answers. They don't. They create the problems. Look at the virus, for instance. China created the virus. We created the problem. Our own politicians. I said in a tweet today, and let me pull this tweet up. It's lessons learned from 2020, or facts of 2020 already. And so let's see here. Let me pull this up. Facts 2020. 1, never assume a virus isn't dangerous. How can somebody just all of a sudden assume, like these blue checkmark weirdos on Twitter, that automatically say that no, the virus isn't real? That we can accept a small percentage of people dying, but we shouldn't overreact to this. Well, I find it's always better to err on the side of caution and danger when it comes to a virus, especially when people are dropping dead from it, regardless if they're elderly or not. That's the first thing. Lockdowns can't extend long enough to stop a virus. I think that's clear now. I think unless it's a virus that they just automatically have a solution to, even now, we cannot shelter in place long enough without destroying our economy. And we don't even know what's going to happen over the next 2 months. I've been predicting that people are going to start starving and rioting and looting, not just the conservatives. I have a feeling the one thing about this virus and what's happening is it's going to start bringing conservatives and liberals together, because it can't go on for too much longer. This lockdown cannot go for too much longer. People have no work. They have no money. And it's not like if it opens back up, they're even going to have a job, because companies are gone. So I think we've discovered that in 1918, 50 million people died. But in 2020, you may have a less number of people that died from the first wave of the virus. There could still be another wave of the virus. But if you keep people locked up, they very well could starve to death. And what's happening in Texas, I don't know if you know this, but yesterday, Sunday, they had the biggest number of cases in Texas since they started to open the state back up. And why? If you see videos, everybody's going to bars and eating in restaurants, and nobody's wearing a mask. I mean, not to say that a mask is going to protect you from inhaling the virus. Let's see, how does it go? It's not going to protect you. I saw this a meme that explained this perfectly. It's going to protect you, from me, from spraying the virus on you. That's what it is. You wear a mask to keep it from spraying on me if you have it. I wear a mask to keep it from spraying on you. It's not so much that you wear a mask so you don't inhale it. It's that you wear a mask so you don't affect others. That's why you're wearing a mask. And you look at these videos, these restaurants and stuff, and look, they opened it up. And like I just said, I think it was a wishful thinking with this quarantine, but people going out and throwing caution to the wind, it has gotten even worse because they've kept people locked up for too long. Had we said we're going to quarantine, we did it, and they said, restaurants are starting to go out of business. Okay, we got to start looking at this. Restaurants are a good example. Restaurants and places where people get their haircut and stuff, those are the first businesses that are going to go out of business. First companies are going to go out of business. And you kind of use that, I believe, as a litmus test for the rest of the country. And you start to say, whoa, we got to stop right now, because we actually may have to let people out, but let's teach the people how to be safe so they don't start all these conspiracy theories and go down these rabbit holes, and actually watch out for each other. Because that's what happens when you're wearing a mask. You're watching out for me. When I wear one, I'm watching out for you. So, but I think the other lesson, that lesson we learned, is that lockdowns can't extend long enough to stop the virus. They just can't. Maybe it's best that we just go out and whoever dies, dies. Now, I'm not like these other weirdos on Twitter and stuff that are out there saying that, 2% is an acceptable margin of death. I don't believe that. But I do believe we may not have a choice. It's not that I'm trying to justify the death, which Candace Owens and many others did on Twitter. I'm not trying to justify that. I just am looking at it realistically now and saying the lesson learned is we may not be able to quarantine from a virus that's unknown and we don't know how to fix it. Number 3. Remember, this is Facts of 2020. It was just a tweet that I made. And there's a lot more than just this, but I only had room for 4. State and federal governments are ran by buffoons who need a constitutional ass whooping. They do. And that's the void that I'm talking about. Those are the people that have filled the void that was left empty because we all sold out to the Republican and Democrat parties as the only way. And as I've explained ad nauseum already, they're not. And number 4, the citizenry at large, there's some people that do, but the citizenry at large has no clue how to whoop the government's ass. They don't. They don't know how to stand up against a tyrannical government. And trust me, folks, you are seeing essence of tyranny. Listen to this soundbite. This is going to blow your mind right here. If you didn't see this, I tweeted this out with the words balls above it, and you're going to understand why. Now, remember, this is Nassau County, right? I don't know who this woman is. She's a county executive, I believe. Yes. Nassau County executive. I don't know what her name is. But she's given a press conference, okay? She's got cops on either side of her, maybe a fireman, but two official guys on either side of her wearing masks. She has her mask down around her neck so that you could see her face, as though you wouldn't know who she is, despite the fact that she's on TV every single day. So here's what she's telling you, and she's giving this speech without a mask on a tennis court with people playing tennis behind her. And this is what she says.
Every player, unless they're from the same household, has to bring their own tennis balls so that you don't touch other people's tennis balls with your hands. You can kick their balls, but you can't touch them. I'm going to blush, sorry.
Now, we're all laughing because she said, you can touch their tennis balls, but you can't kick their balls. Okay, ha ha ha, it's funny. But folks, this is real. This is tyranny. She's telling you, if you live in Nassau County, how you can carry tennis balls. Now, that should blow your mind. Listen to the rest of this.
Of course, if you're playing with someone in your household, you can touch those tennis balls. To avoid confusion between whose balls are whose, you can use a marker, like a Sharpie, to mark out, to put an X or put someone's initials on them.
Is this how stupid people have gotten? That the big government has to come in and tell you how to carry tennis balls, and that you cannot. She's not saying that you should. She's saying you can't. You cannot use somebody else's tennis balls. You could kick it with your foot, which if she knew anything at all, and let's say that tennis ball had virus all over it and she kicked it, well, guess what's going to happen? If it's been within the time span that virus can live on that tennis ball, she just released millions of particles of that virus into the air. That's how stupid these people are. They're dumb to the facts. And then anybody who's worked in the federal government or had a bad boss that was an authoritarian, that had rank but didn't really have knowledge, or in the military, you see this all the time in the military. You understand this. This woman is telling people in a situation where it has to do with the virus, okay? And I know the people want to go out and play tennis, and she's trying to tell people when we release you, we finally let people out, which is tyrannical in itself, and you want to go play tennis, that you have to mark your own balls and you can't touch somebody else's tennis ball. And if you want to move it, then you just kick the ball out of the way or whatever. Folks, if we're that stupid, right? If people are going to go play tennis and they don't realize that Corona Joe over there has been mouthing all over. First of all, most people don't play tennis with people that they don't know. And look, I had COVID, right? You're not going to go and play tennis if you have the coronavirus. You're not. You're freaked out because you don't know if you're going to die in 3 days, which happens to some people and some people doesn't. So you don't know. But if somebody goes out to play tennis and they're just grabbing balls in this day right now, and in the potential that this virus has, there's nothing you can do to stop somebody that stupid. They're going to walk right past the tennis ball. Let's say that it's marked, or that these people out there policing the tennis balls. That person, if they're that dumb, they're probably, or they just don't care. Maybe they just don't care. Maybe they're not dumb. Maybe they know that it's potential for the virus, but they're just saying, hey, I'm just throwing caution to the wind. I don't care anymore. I'm not going to try. That person is probably going to go to their grocery store, get groceries, go home, take them in, and not wash their hands. They're going to get the virus eventually if they come in contact with it. That's not the government's job to make sure that you're carrying your groceries or your tennis balls correctly. That's on you. You're an adult. I mean, this is This is the essence of tyranny right here. This is the essence of people who buy into the lie of socialism. I'm in charge. I know more than you do. I'm the government. We'll take care of you. You do as little as possible because we can't trust that you're smart enough to do it right. That is what this is. And as funny as that soundbite sounds, listening to it again now infuriates me because she's literally having a press conference, and a lot of these people are doing this for political reasons so they can get their face out there. She's not wearing her mask, which, she's out there making these other people wear their mask. They're not 6 feet apart, which they're all telling us to be 6 feet apart. There's people playing tennis behind her, and she's talking about how you should carry or touch your tennis balls, and she thinks it's funny. Just like when Cuomo sits up there all bug-eyed, that guy just weirds me out, man. First of all, I don't know if you know this about Cuomo. I'm not making this up. You go look up the pictures, type in Cuomo nipple rings. He sits up there with a polo shirt on, a white polo shirt, in a press conference with his nipple rings poking through. That has got to be the weird. What is going on in this country? We got nipple ring Cuomo just killing people in New York State. You got a transgender health secretary in Pennsylvania just killing people. Both of them nefariously maneuvered so that they either couldn't get in trouble or their loved one wouldn't die from the things that they were enacting. And you got the Walking Dead out there in L.A. What is going on with this country? Listen, the people in Michigan are getting it. Okay, you're getting it. You're doing the right thing. You're going to the right location. There just has to be more of you. You can't do it with 50 or even 200 people. There needs to be 10,000. There needs to be 100,000. If you're conservative and you live in Michigan, you all need to get organized and get those people out there at once. And listen, don't be stupid. Leave your kids at home. Don't go without masks because listen, here's the difference between this tennis ball nonsense and what I'm talking about. She's telling you this is the way it must be done. But when free people get together and there's a potential virus, whether you believe it or not, put a mask on because you're putting it on for me, not for you. Don't bring your children out there and potentially expose them or your elderly, parents because the virus ain't nothing. It's just a flu. Well, don't take that chance, regardless of what you feel about Fauci or Bill Gates or anybody else. Don't take the chance because if you die because of it, it validates what the leftists say. It validates their ability to keep you locked up. Don't go down that road. Be responsible. See, that's the bottom line of this whole thing is that we have to, the conservatives, the constitutionalists, and I would even say the liberals, stop with this liberal conservative thing, first of all, okay? Stop with it. And I've had multiple shows on this. Stop with I'm Democrat or I'm Republican. Just listen, you're an American citizen. You're free. And the one thing that none of us want, I can guarantee you may think you want it if you're liberal in this country. You may think you want it. But the last thing you want is the government coming in and grabbing hold of your freedoms and your rights. It won't matter if you're black or white, male or female, or transgender, or if you're too dumb to pick up tennis balls. The government is going to be in charge, and you won't be of your own life. You won't be. And I don't care if you like President Trump or you don't like him. That man has only been in office for 3 years. Things are messed up because of the people who have been in Congress for 30 years, because of the Democrat and Republican parties that have been around for hundreds of years. President Trump has been in office for 3.5 years. And until this virus came out, I mean, this country was doing pretty spectacularly. It's not his fault. But regardless of what you feel about him, if you think it's going to be better when the government takes over your rights and gives you free stuff, first of all, they can't afford to give you free stuff. Secondly, they're going to be telling you not just about how do you kick somebody else's tennis ball away from you. They're going to be telling you when you can go eat at the buffet and when you can't eat at the buffet. And if you own the buffet, the government's probably going to take it over. But if they don't take it over, they're going to tell you what you can cook and what you can't cook. They're going to tell you when you can serve it and when you can't, and the hours that you have to be open. That's the way that works. This whole thing about communism is a BS lie. Okay, there is no utopia. There's heaven, right? And then there's earth, and then there's hell. And earth and where we live, mankind lives, is where we were cast upon after Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden and were tricked by Satan, the great liar, the father of all lies, which, I don't know if you realize this, if you look at what he believes and what he wants, it's exactly in line with what socialism wants. Isn't that interesting? I think that's good for the show today. Make sure that you mark your own tennis balls with a Sharpie so the government doesn't come and get you. Scary. That, my friends, wow. That, unfortunately, is the state of affairs in this country. And that, unfortunately, is the truth. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and we're out of here.
Blush, sorry. Of course, if you're playing with someone in your household, you can touch those tennis balls. To avoid confusion between whose balls are whose, you can use a marker like a Sharpie to mark out, to put an X or put someone's initials on them.